Our final speaker, Georgie Harman, CEO of Beyond Blue. Georgie was appointed as a CEO of Beyond Blue in May 2014. She has had significant and broad-ranging policy and service delivery experience in the community, public and private sectors in Australia and the United Kingdom. From 2006 to 2012, Georgie worked at the Commonwealth Department of Health, where she had national responsibility for mental health, suicide prevention and substance misuse policy and programs, including those targeting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. She was one of the architects of the 2011 cross-portfolio National Mental Health Reform Budget Package. At the same time, she was responsible for the early strategy and development of legislation to introduce plain packaging of tobacco products in Australia, a world first. She came to Australia in 1999 to be the inaugural Executive Director for the Bobby Goldsmith Foundation in Sydney, Australia's first and largest independent HIV/AIDS charity. We're really blessed to have Georgie here tonight. As we know, the organisations that we're supporting are around mental health, and there's no bigger organisations than Beyond Blue. So thanks, Georgie.
Thank you, and it's a very fortunate position to follow Sherelle, can I just say. I am a very ordinary Australian. So look, can you believe it's August? We're so far into this year that seems to have just started yesterday. 2017 was a momentous year when I think back on it. We saw the rising of Donald Trump. We saw Brexit. There were the death of giants that certainly influenced me when I was a kid. David Bowie, Prince, George Michael. I'm showing my age now and my musical taste. Harper Lee, Muhammad Ali. Great giants. We woke up too many mornings hearing about the latest terror attack. So all in all, it was a pretty tumultuous spin around the sun. But in the midst of all of these global upheavals, we all faced very personal challenges too. And I, for one, was extremely happy to see the back of 2016. Because for me, it was a year when the professional and the personal collided in quite a spectacular way. I'd always tried to keep my professional life in mental health and suicide prevention separate from who I was and the face that I showed the world. I believe that that's what a strong leader should do. At the time I became Beyond Blue's CEO, the broad understanding of successful leaders was that they were the strongest members of the team. They would confidently, unflinchingly carry the weight of their lives, their decisions, and the expectations and needs of the whole community without succumbing to the pressure. I now know that's not true. Last year, I nearly lost my way. Everything went wrong. My 20-year relationship had ended, and my ex-partner and I went our separate ways. Now, that was a good decision. That was the right decision for me, but it had a profound effect on me in ways that took me completely by surprise. I was no longer part of a partnership that had, in part, defined me for 2 decades. I no longer had someone to rely upon, someone to come home to, someone to talk things through with, someone that challenged me and told me, Georgie, you're being an idiot. I threw myself into work because I just needed to be busy. I distracted myself with that busyness. I didn't want to go home. I was making really bad choices outside of work. I became extremely familiar with the Pinots of the Mornington Peninsula. I drank far too much. In fact, I think I was probably a functioning alcoholic. I drank to sleep. I drank to forget. I drank to obliterate the feelings that I was actually going through. I stopped exercising. I put on 20 kilos. I made excuses for my poor diet. I was busy. I was a CEO. I was always on planes. I was always in the Qantas lounge. I was living out of a suitcase. I was always out at work events. I didn't have time to go shopping for food. I didn't have time for the mundane things of life like 8 hours sleep. I was functioning at work, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. I found myself really struggling to make decisions, really battling to get out of bed in some mornings. And all the time I had my entire team, Jeff Kennett, my then boss, looking at me, expecting me to be strong, expecting me to always have the answers. But as you can see, I'm somewhat less than 10 foot tall. I'm certainly not bulletproof. And it doesn't matter how long I subscribe to light and easy, I'm always going to look a bit wobbly now in a bikini. I wasn't clinically depressed, but I was well on my way. And then I did something that 2 or 3 years earlier would have been unthinkable for me. A friend and then a colleague, so 2 separate people, came up to me and said, "Georgie, we are worried about you." And I let them in and I told my story. And I also told my story publicly to really big crowds as well as smaller, more intimate crowds like this. The first time was at a national conference of HR leaders. It was absolutely terrifying. It wasn't something that I planned to do, but I was boring myself rigid with a talk that I was giving about mentally healthy workplaces and the role of authentic leadership in creating them. So I was wanging on about this, and I looked around and I hadn't captured no one. So I paused for a moment and then I opened my mouth and I started to tell my story, and the words just came tumbling out. And it completely changed the room, as it does every single time. It makes people, even for that moment, stop and think about themselves. This may all seem a very personal thing, and it is. But I bet it is for many of you in this room too. Sharing my story goes to the heart of what Beyond Blue does every day in helping people understand that mental health issues and struggles can affect any one of us. It doesn't mean we're unworthy. It doesn't mean we're any less smart. It doesn't mean we're weak or incompetent or any less good at the job that we're employed to do. It just means we have to look after our whole selves, not just ourselves from the neck downwards. People often ask me what mental health and mental illness look like. And I say, it looks like people just like us. And I can't even figure out how to use this screen. I need a teenager. Oh no, this is a disaster. I'm just going to hand this to someone that knows what they're doing.
I'm not a teenager and I'm not that smart with technology.
Oh, no. No, it's just that. Can we go to the next one? Which button do I press? That one. Okay, all right. So let's go back to basics and let's learn a little bit about mental health. It affects half of us, nearly half of us, at some point in our lifetime. At some point in our lifetime, 45% of us will experience some form of a mental health condition. 3 million of us live right now with depression and or anxiety. Every day, today, 200 Australians attempted to die. They attempted to die by suicide. On each of these days, 8 Australians died by suicide. That is twice the national road toll. Depression and anxiety are the most common mental health conditions, and they're extremely democratic. They often go hand in hand and they wrap their arms around a person. The World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realises his or her own potential. They can cope with the normal stresses of life, they can work productively and fruitfully, and they're able to make a contribution to the community. So mental health is something we should all aspire to, but confusingly, we often use mental health as a substitute for mental health conditions. One way to explain the difference is to imagine mental health as a spectrum, from positive, healthy functioning at one end through to severe conditions that impact on daily life at the other end. And during our lives, we move up and down that continuum in response to life events and experiences. At the green end, people show resilience and high levels of well-being. That doesn't mean that they never experience any mental health challenges. but they draw on a range of coping mechanisms to manage difficulties as they come along. It's common and normal for all of us to feel sad or down from time to time and hover around the yellow or even enter the orange zone. This only tips into clinical depression in the red when the symptoms intensify and continue for a number of weeks. So now let's have a look at how these symptoms actually play out in the way that they affect our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviour, and indeed even physically. It's very common for people to experience mild anxiety and stress until when the pressure's on in the yellow or the orange. Yet these feelings are not clinical anxiety. They only become clinical anxiety in the red when they're severe, long-lasting and interfere with daily life. People describe anxiety as constantly feeling nervous, stressed, on edge, and not being able to stop or control worrying. It's totally exhausting. So as I stand here tonight, I'm pleased to say that I love my life. I'm doing great. I look fabulous, don't I? I've lost that 20 kilos. Telling my story has helped me get back my mojo. It's strengthened my experience as a leader, and I believe it's solidified the team that I have around me because they actually realise that I'm human just like them. I'm putting Beyond Blue's messages into action, and I saw a counsellor myself for a while. I've got a personal trainer who whips my bum every three mornings a week. I've reconnected with old friends and I've made some great new ones. I'm eating better than I ever have done, although I must say it is still somewhat of a challenge. And I just need to show you this because every presentation has to have a dog video. I still love a drink, but now I drink with a different motivation. So my message to you is to educate yourself, and that talking and seeking help when you're in the yellow or the orange means you have the best chance of turning things around. Because worryingly, only 46% of Australians with mental health conditions actually seek support. Many think that being angry all the time, not sleeping, worrying excessively, feeling sad and isolated, not joining in social activities is just the way they are. People often dramatically adapt their lives so they can live with these symptoms. Others may be embarrassed or ashamed by the twin viruses of stigma and discrimination. And it's this stigma and discrimination that stands in the way of recovery. It stops conversations happening at the right time. It stops people putting their hands up when they're struggling. And this is where your individual leadership really comes to the fore. Think about it. Do you really feel the same way about depression as you do cancer or diabetes? People won't discuss the way they're feeling at home, in schools, in the club room, or at work, or even go to the doctor if they think they're going to be judged by others. They're going to be seen as weak, not capable of coping, having a flaw in their character, or being thought of as a burden. One of the things we can all do is check in on our mates. But I know from my work that it's the one thing that most of the people in the general community worry the most about. You don't have to be a mental health expert. As a general rule, if someone's been down or stressed in your life for a couple of weeks or more, and it's affecting what they normally would do, then it's your job to find out what's going on. Start by sharing your concerns, saying why you're worried, and then follow up with a question, and there's an example on the screen there. If they start to talk, let them guide the conversation without jumping in and offering solutions. You can ask, have you thought about what you want to do next? You can refer them to the Beyond Blue website for information, or even get out your smartphone and put it up right there and then. Try offering help in a way that allows them to make the decision about what to do. Something like, you've felt this way for a while now and you don't seem to have improved. Do you think it would be helpful to see someone? If they don't want to seek help, respect that decision at that point. But keep reminding them that you're there, that you care, and that you're ready whenever they are. And that asking for help is indeed a sign of great strength. Don't underestimate the power of this conversation. You don't need to have the answers, you just need to be willing to start, to listen without judgment, to be there, and to persist. And don't forget that we're also here, night and day, free and in confidence to speak with you. So for me, it is personal. I didn't see it coming and I ignored it for too long. If this can happen to me, as the CEO of Beyond Blue, it can happen to any single one of us. It's not good enough to wait until you're in the amber or the red and then act. Take this new language with you when you go about your day. Keep it in mind as you ride the highs and lows of work, academic and family life. Use it to help yourselves and those around you. It's a struggle to accept our own vulnerabilities, to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and that we sometimes need help. In the end, it's easier and definitely healthier if we reveal rather than conceal our true selves. So be game changers and set those vulnerabilities free. Thank you.